on Mr. Robert McLennan.
This morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. I also called on Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and presented her with a gift from the Cabinet to mark her 90th year. In addition to my duties in this House, I will be having further meetings later today. This evening, I hope to have an audience of Her Majesty the Queen.
Mr. Robert McLennan.
It was a cold weather payment.
While welcoming the Cabinet's recognition of my constituent, the Queen Mother, in that way, can the Prime Minister say...
Order! Order!
She does, can the Prime Minister say why, when he came to the House last week to announce the waiver of the exceptionally severe weather payments conditions, 7-day condition, he did not give any inkling that it was to last for 24 hours and that in 4 days his Minister of State for Social Security would announce that things were back to where they are. This isn't, now you see it, now you don't, cannot be the way to look after those in our community who are so severely dependent upon this payment.
If there is doubt about that point, let me seek to remove it beyond peradventure at the moment. As I said last week, given the exceptionally severe weather, we wanted to ensure that vulnerable groups would take appropriate steps to keep warm, so we waived the 7-day qualifying period. Given the continuation of severe weather since then, we shall once again be waiving the 7-day period. And of course, we shall continue to monitor the situation carefully, and if the cold weather will continue, we will take similar measures.
Mr. David Everett, number 2.
I refer my honourable friend to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Mr. Everett.
While my right honourable friend was enjoying his much publicised breakfast at the weekend, the people of Lithuania were voting in a referendum. Does my right honourable friend agree that the desire for independence by the Lithuanians, as expressed in the result of the referendum, should be heeded by the Soviet Union?
Well, I sympathise very much with the point my honourable friend makes. I would like to see the Soviet authorities negotiate with the elected representatives of the Baltic authorities about their aspirations. That is a point I hope to be able to put to President Gorbachev when I meet him next month.
Mr. Neil Kinnock.
Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister share the deep concern that unemployment and business bankruptcies and factory gate prices are up, whilst investment and output are down? Whose policies does he blame for this? The current Chancellor's or the last Chancellor's?
Of course, I think everybody shares the concern, both about bankruptcies and about unemployment. About bankruptcies and about unemployment. We also share the very considerable degree of pleasure at the growth there has been in recent years. The growth of businesses there have been, even over the last year, at over 1,000 a year, and the prospects that will continue to exist for this country as we increasingly drive inflation downwards.
The Prime Minister understand that he's taken many of those and longer established businesses straight into slump with his policies. Why won't he now cut interest rates, use a more sensible system of managing demand, and try to stop the slump now before the damage gets even worse and goes on even longer?
The right honourable gentleman should know that these generalised slogans simply won't do from him. If I may quote to him what even The Guardian said of those alternatives. As for the opposition policies, their call for interest rate cuts with no accompanying recognition of the economic realities is politically opportunistic and economically naive. I agree with The Guardian.
Speaker, may I just put to him that in this very week, factory gate prices are up, unemployment will be up, the bankruptcies are up, Is this what he intends to go on doing? And if he does, may I say to him that his policies are hurting just about everyone and working for just about no one?
I think the honourable gentleman will, right honourable gentleman will find out that they are working, and I think that will become increasingly, I believe that will become increasingly apparent. Insofar as the rise in output prices he refers to is concerned, I must say I think that is a suspect figure. But the January figure in any event may well reflect delayed and the continued impact of the autumn oil prices. But he will see, but the right honourable gentleman will see throughout the whole of this year a continuing fall in the rise of inflation.
Mr. Andrew Rowe.
Although at this particular moment it must seem bizarre to imagine that there could be advantages in transferring from road to rail, could my right honourable friend confirm that in better times, when the Department of Transport appraises capital projects, it allows both for freight as well as for passenger savings on road as part of their appraisal?
Well, insofar as I was able to hear the first part of my honourable friend's question, I believe that I agree with him. Insofar as British Rail is concerned, they have a substantial investment level at present, indeed at the highest level for 30 years. As the former chairman said not long ago, the investment programme is about the maximum rate we can physically manage.
Mr. Mark Fisher.
Number 3, sir.
I refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Fisher.
What's on the menu, Mark?
Order. Mr. Fisher.
Isn't the Prime Minister ashamed? Isn't the Prime Minister ashamed that there are an estimated 50 young homeless people sleeping rough on the streets of Stoke-on-Trent? They are not eligible for his severe weather payments, nor for his emergency aid. What place for them in his classless society?
As the honourable gentleman knows, I have indicated on a number of occasions my concern and the action we are taking about the position of young people, who are sleeping rough. My honourable friend, the Minister of Housing, set out some policies some time ago, together with a considerable amount of resources devoted to meeting them. One of the problems, I must say to the honourable gentleman, that is recognised and acknowledged by the voluntary groups, if not perhaps by everyone in this House, is that some of the people who sleep rough have every option to go into shelters, but frequently do not take it.
Mr. Tim Janman.
Is my right honourable friend aware of press reports speculating that the public sector borrowing requirement for 1991-92 will be £9 billion? Would my right honourable friend agree that during the forthcoming 12 months it is important that the government applies the same disciplines to itself as companies in the private sector are having to apply, and that government spending should take into account prevailing economic conditions and not pretend they don't exist?
We must certainly always take into account the prevailing economic conditions in terms of public expenditure control, and that is certainly what we will do.
Mr. Andrew Bennett. Number 4.
I refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Bennett.
Does the Prime Minister recall one of his early votes in the House of Commons on the 20th of December 1979, when he voted to break the link between pensions and earnings? Does he realise that as a result of that, pensioners have not enjoyed increases in their standard of living as a result of general improvements, and that they are now £22 a week worse off for a married couple and £13 for a single pensioner? And does he realise that if those links had not been broken, people would have actually had sufficient money to pay for fuel, to make sure they could have enough to eat, and that they could put warm clothing on and so combat cold weather? Doesn't he realise against that background the announcement he's made today about the extra £1 heating allowance is extremely miserly?
The honourable gentleman is being very selective in the figures that he quotes. if he cares to examine the degree of net disposable income amongst all sectors of the community, including the elderly, he will find that it has risen substantially throughout the last decade.
Mr. John Lee!
Given that our nation likes a modest flutter as much as it likes a traditional happy eater breakfast, would my right honourable friend care today to give some encouragement to those of us who favour the concept of a national lottery designed to provide additional resources to sports, the arts and museums?
My honourable friend raises an intriguing question.
Mr. Tom Clark!
Number 5, Mr. Speaker.
The government's policy on community care remains as set out in the White Paper Caring for People and the National Health Service and Community Care Act 1990. Local authorities begin implementation of these policies in April this year.
Tom Clark.
Mr. Speaker, what steps does the Prime Minister intend to take to deal with the growing problems of many elderly people in residential care who are seeing a growing number of closures in private and voluntary sector homes as a result of the care gap and inadequate income support? Would he absolutely insist that elderly people will not suffer in spite of the necessity for social service and social work departments to reduce their expenditure in order to avoid poll tax capping, even though their real anxiety is to respond to the needs of elderly people which they recognise in their own communities?
The concerns for elderly people that the honourable gentleman sets out and that local authorities have are well understood and appreciated. I must say I think he weakens his case by his remarks about community charge capping, not least because a large number of those authorities who do face community charge capping do so because of a flagrant and willful abuse of their expenditure in many aspects.
Mr. Winterton.
Mr. Speaker, would my right honourable friend accept that there is considerable concern in local government, not least amongst the staff of Part 3 residential homes, and also, of course, the residents of those homes, that many local authorities feel obliged to put such homes into the private or charitable sector, thus, as it were, creating considerable instability where Part 3 homes are concerned? And will he, in fact, take account of the concern, particularly of the elderly people concerned and their families who are deeply upset by the instability that this situation is causing?
What we are seeking to do is to ensure the maximum availability of the appropriate sort of accommodation and to ensure that that is provided in the most cost-effective way. That may, on occasion, be in the public or in the private sector, but it is the quantum of assistance that I know my honourable friend is most concerned about.
Mr. John Fraser.
I refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Fraser.
Does the Prime Minister recall that shortly before becoming Prime Minister, he said that the subject that he cares most about is education, and that he repeated those sentiments at the Conservative Party Young Conservative Conference last weekend? Mr. Speaker, I have in my hand the sum total of all the speeches made by the Prime Minister on education since 1979. It averages one line a year. Could he put in the library any other speeches on this subject which are so close to his heart?
The honourable gentleman is being uncharacteristically fatuous. Well, Mr. Speaker, if colleagues insist, then I will withdraw uncharacteristically. For the bulk of the period since 1979 in this House, I have been a minister, either in the Whip's office unable to speak or with departmental responsibilities. If the honourable gentleman had had what undoubtedly would have been an education to him in listening to the speeches I had made outside this House, then he would not have asked that question.
Robert Swab. Number 7.
Refer my honourable friend to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Robin Squire.
Despite my right honourable friend and I both having left our state schools at 16, and therefore perhaps being poor educational advertisements, well, I said perhaps, would he underline his determination that standards and diversity in our state schools be enhanced and improved, and above all that the staying on rate for students from 16 and 18 be increased?
I'm happy to endorse that point made by my honourable friend. Education is undoubtedly the key in the future to opening new paths for people, and not just people with high abilities, but of course people with much lesser abilities as well. And we do wish to see an education system that rewards dedicated teachers, that provides an education in the state sector that we can be proud of, and that is what we shall be increasingly reaching towards throughout the Conservative governments of the 1990s.
Presentation of bills.